and he could see every one, and it would retain no colour but its own. And Arthur sat within the carpet, and Owain the son of Urien was standing before him. "Owain," said Arthur, "wilt thou play chess?" "I will, lord," said Owain. And the red youth brought the chess for Arthur and Owain, golden pieces, and a board of silver. And they began to play. And while they were thus, and when they were best amused with their game, behold, they saw a white tent with a red canopy, and the figure of a jet black serpent on top of the tent, and red glaring venomous eyes in the head of the serpent, and a red flaming tongue. And there came a young page, with yellow curling hair, and blue eyes, and a newly springing beard, wearing a coat and a surcoat of yellow satin, and hose of thin greenish yellow cloth upon his feet, and over his hose shoes of party coloured leather, fastened at the insteps with golden clasps. And he bore a heavy three-edged sword with a golden hilt, in a scabbard of black leather tipped with fine gold. And he came to the place where the Emperor and Owain were playing at chess. And the youth saluted Owain. And Owain marvelled that the youth should salute him, and should not have saluted the Emperor Arthur. And Arthur knew what was in Owain's thought, and he said to Owain, "Marvel not that the youth salutes thee now, for he saluted me erewhile, and it is unto thee that his errand is." Then said the youth unto Owain, "Lord, is it with thy leave that the young pages and attendants of the Emperor harass and torment and worry the Ravens? And if it be not with thy leave, cause the Emperor to forbid them." "Lord," said Owain, "thou hearest what the youth says. If it seem good to thee, forbid them from my Ravens." "Play thy game," said he. Then the youth returned to the tent. That game did they finish, and another they began. And when they were in the midst of the game, behold, a ruddy young man with auburn curling hair, and large eyes, well grown, and having his beard new shorn, came forth from a bright yellow tent, upon the summit of which was the figure of a bright red lion. And he was clad in a coat of yellow satin, falling as low as the small of his leg, and embroidered with threads of red silk. And on his feet were hose of fine white buckram, and buskins of black leather were over his hose, whereon were golden clasps. And in his hand a huge heavy three-edged sword, with a scabbard of red deer hide, tipped with gold. And he came to the place where Arthur and Owain were playing at chess. And he saluted him. And Owain was troubled at his salutation, but Arthur minded it no more than before. And the youth said unto Owain, "Is it not against thy will that the attendants of the Emperor harass thy Ravens, killing some and worrying others? If against thy will it be, beseech him to forbid them." "Lord," said Owain, "forbid thy men, if it seem good to thee." "Play thy game," said the Emperor. And the youth returned to the tent. And that game was ended, and another begun. And as they were beginning the first move of the game, they beheld at a small distance from them a tent speckled yellow, the largest ever seen, and the figure of an eagle of gold upon it, and a precious stone on the eagle's head. And coming out of the tent, they saw a youth with thick yellow hair upon his head, fair and comely, and a scarf of blue satin upon him, and a brooch of gold in the scarf upon his right shoulder, as large as a warrior's middle finger. And upon his feet were hose of fine totness, and shoes of party-coloured leather, clasped with gold. And the youth was of noble bearing, fair of face, with ruddy cheeks, and large hawk's eyes. In the hand of the youth was a mighty lance, speckled yellow, with a newly sharpened head, and upon the lance a banner displayed. Fiercely angry, and with rapid pace, came the youth to the place where Arthur was playing at chess with Owain. And they perceived that he was wroth. And thereupon he saluted Owain, and told him that his ravens had been killed, the chief part of them, and that such of them as were not slain were so wounded and bruised, that not one of them could raise its wings a single fathom above the earth. "Lord," said Owain, "forbid thy men." "Play," said he, "if it please thee." Then said Owain to the youth, "Go back, and wherever thou findest the strife at the thickest, there lift up the banner, and let come what pleases Heaven." So the youth returned back to the place where the strife bore hardest upon the ravens, and he lifted up the banner, and as he did so, they all rose up in the air, wrathful and fierce and high of spirit, clapping their wings in the wind, and shaking off the weariness that was upon them, and recovering their energy and courage, furiously and with exultation did they, with one sweep, descend upon the heads of the men who had erewhile caused them anger, and pain, and damage, and they seized some by the heads, and others by the eyes, and some by the ears, and others by the arms, and carried them up into the air. And in the air there was a mighty tumult, with the flapping of the wings of the triumphant ravens, and with their croaking. And there was another mighty tumult, with the groaning of the men that were being torn and wounded, and some of whom were slain. End of section 14. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.